Well, folks, it looks like I'm going to be wrong, and the Tennessee Titans are going to cut Xavier Restrepo. I think it's a big mistake. I'll explain why, plus tell you who I think does make the team on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, roster cuts are coming, which means it's time for my final 53-man roster prediction. I'm going to tell you why I think the Titans cut Xavier Restrepo and why I may be wrong, but I don't think the Titans are right. Also, we're going to talk about some of the math problems that the Titans have with injuries at running back and tight end, and I'll explain why I think the Titans should go heavy on offensive line with the first 53. On tomorrow's show, I am going to do the defensive side of the ball, so make sure that you tune in for that. But before we dive into my offensive roster predictions, do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. Hello, the season is right around the corner. Nobody is putting out the amount of Tennessee Titans content that I do for free all year round, all season long. So make sure that you stay locked in with the Locked On Titans podcast. It's your team every day. With that being said, though, again, I think the Tennessee Titans are going to keep 7 wide receivers. It's what we've talked about all along, and the reality is they're going to keep 7 wide receivers, and I don't think one of those guys is going to be Xavier Restrepo. So, of course, right up front, I was wrong. I called Xavier Restrepo a lock, and hey, maybe I'm wrong about this, and Restrepo does end up making the team. But right now, it does look like I'm going to be wrong about my big, bold prediction for the roster that Xavier Restrepo would find a way to make this team. And at the end of the day, again, I may have been wrong, but I don't think that the Tennessee Titans are right. I think this is an incredibly short-sighted move to cut Xavier Restrepo. I've been saying it for the last few weeks. Is he as good of a punt returner as James Proche? No, he's not. But you're going to look back in a couple of years and be like, man, that's a helpful player who had a great connection with our quarterback that would have been a good boost for a group that isn't that great for the Titans right now. And we kept guys like Bryce Oliver, like James Proche, even a guy like Van Jefferson. You're going to be like, the Tennessee Titans really cut Xavier Restrepo to keep Van Jefferson, Bryce Oliver, James Proche. They kept 7 wide receivers on that roster and couldn't find a way to get Xavier Restrepo there. Now, maybe nobody wants Xavier Restrepo and he ends up back on the practice squad for the Titans. Obviously, that's what I would like to see. That would be the best outcome if they do cut Xavier Restrepo because he's still with the team. He could get poached by somebody else, of course, but at the end of the day, I think Restrepo is going to be a more helpful player for the next 2 to 3 years than Proche, Oliver, or Van Jefferson. So I just think it's short-sighted, even if I understand that James Proche is a better punt returner. Van Jefferson is a bigger body and faster, and what the Titans need with versatility. Bryce Oliver is good on special teams and being a gunner on punt coverage and stuff like that. Like, I get the utilitarian value of the guys who are being kept over Xavier Restrepo. But as a team that's a rebuilding team that probably isn't going to the playoffs this year, that certainly isn't a Super Bowl or playoff contender, I just think keeping the guy around who, you can't tell me that the Titans kept Thomas Odukoye and David Martin Robinson on the roster last year because they wanted to develop them, but they're not going to keep Xavier Restrepo around. And quite frankly, as we go through this roster and we go through the numbers, I had a hard time finding 53 guys because this roster stinks. I don't want to keep some of these guys that I had to keep to make 53, and quite honestly, I don't think the Titans do either. So rather than keeping some of these guys on the defensive side of the ball or maybe one of these tight ends, I'd rather the Titans just keep 8 wide receivers and keep Xavier Restrepo around. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. I think I'm going to be wrong about that bold prediction. And at the end of the day, though, like I said, I may have been wrong, but I think the Titans aren't right. either. With that being said, though, who else makes it in the wide receiver room? No shockers here. We have Calvin Ridley at the top. We have Van Jefferson. We have Tyler Lockett. We have Alec Iomanner. We have Chim DK. We have Bryce Oliver. And we have James Prochet. Again, James Prochet at the end, because I think he will be the team's starting punt returner. And with how bad the Titans were on special teams last year, that's got to be such a traumatic conversation to have when you're talking about what to do with special teams. The Titans can't take any chances there. They can't afford to have a bad special teams group. So I think that will keep James Prochet on the roster. And Prochet has been solid as a wide receiver in camp as well. But here's my thing. And I thought it was interesting. Saw a report from Paul Kaharski saying that he thought Chim DK would actually be the team's punt returner. If Chim DK is the starting punt returner, if James Prochet is not starting at punt returner, why is he around? What are we doing? Again, if I see that Chim DK is the Titans starting punt returner, and the Titans cut Xavier Restrepo to keep James Prochet, what are we doing? We're keeping James Prochet around to be a backup punt returner and the 7th best wide receiver on the team with no long-term prospects and viability for the team? Why would we do that? Why would the Titans consider that? Why? I don't understand that. So if that's true and Chim DK, or that prediction is true and Chim DK is going to be the starting punt returner, there is just no place for James Prochet on the roster. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And you could say, oh, well, he's going to be the kickoff returner. Well, in my opinion, it is way easier to find people to do kickoff return than punt return. Punt return is way more dangerous than kickoff return. You're out there by yourself. Things aren't as blocked up as much. The defenders can be right on you. Punt return is so much harder than kickoff return. So why would I keep a guy around to be a designated kickoff returner? And also consider this. There's a 53-man roster for the Titans. 53 players on the roster. 16 players on practice squad, which it'll probably be 17 for the Titans when they get an international pathway player extension for Thomas Odukoye. But we'll talk about that with tight ends. But more importantly, you can't take everybody to game day. You can only take, I believe it's 46 or 48 guys to game day. So you got 53 guys on your roster, but 53 players aren't allowed to dress for the games. You got to inactivate a couple of guys. So when you're looking at wide receiver, it's not just about how many you keep. It's you're not going to be able to have all 7 of your wide receivers active on game day. And if James Prochet is wide receiver 7 and he's not the starting punt returner, which is way harder than kick returner, then why is he on the roster? Keep Restrepo on the roster and make him your inactive guy, since you know that you're going to have to inactivate someone. It can't be Bryce Oliver, who plays on special teams. If DK is doing the returning, it can't be him. And Io, Lockett, Jefferson, and Ridley are your 4 best receivers. So I'm just saying, if Prochet isn't the starting punt returner, he should not be on the team, and Xavier Restrepo should clearly have that spot. Now, let me say this. Obviously, I want Restrepo back on practice squad if the Titans do cut him. I hope he doesn't get picked up by somebody else on waivers or something like that. But if he does, which is what I would expect, then I think Jaquan Jackson and Matt Landers, who Matt Landers is hurt. But if Matt Landers is back soon, I would expect Jaquan Jackson and Matt Landers to be your practice squad guys. But the Titans are number 1 in the waiver claim. And as we're about to discuss with tight end and running back, the Titans are going to claim a lot of guys after other teams start to cut down. And I think that makes doing this roster projection, I'm going to give you 53 guys, 27 guys on today's offensive side of it. But the reality is, I do not think that all of these guys that I'm picking to make the roster will make the roster, because the Titans will claim 5 to 7 guys of other teams who will be taking these spots. So we make the 53, but as you're going to see here when we talk about tight end and we talk about running back, that doesn't mean that I think all of these guys are actually going to make it, because there are going to be guys from other teams who take some of these spots. Today's episode is brought to you by Rougier. Guys, You've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiet Ready. Rougiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rougiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch, and I love that it's completely online. Head to Rougiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL to get $15 off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiet website for full safety information. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. You can take a flyer on Cam Ward for MVP, crown the Titans as a dark horse division winner in August. Make sure that you visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. It's FanDuel. Play your game. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, starting my final 53-man roster prediction for the Tennessee Titans. We're doing the offense on today's show. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing the defensive side of the ball. And then on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, the Titans will have made all of their roster cuts. And on Tuesday night, I'll talk about what it looks like, what we see, takeaways, what to expect. All of that. We'll start to get some waiver stuff on Wednesday to pay attention to. So much coming your way this week. Make sure, again, that you stay locked in with the Locked On Titans podcast. It's your team every day. Also, I have an important request for you guys. Locked On wants to hear from you. They're doing a listener survey. Please go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. So again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out, guys. But with that being said, running back. I think the injuries at the running back position have really created a math problem for the Titans that would have been easier to solve had the injuries not been there. So at running back, you're going to have Tony Pollard. You're obviously going to have Tyjae Spears. But the problem is, in my opinion, with Tyjae Spears being banged up, there are some out there whispering about the possibility that Tyjae Spears goes on injured reserve to start the season, which would knock him out for a minimum of 4 games. If that were to happen, then I think the Titans have no choice but to keep Julius Chestnut. I think Kalel Mullings, who got banged up in the preseason game a little bit, ankle issue, which is what I was hoping for. After the game, we said, I hope it's not a foot. Because if it's a foot issue, that means it could be a broken foot. And if it's a broken foot, remember, that's what got Derrick Henry in 2021. You're probably going to be out multiple months. And the Titans just don't have enough talent at running back right now. And with Tyjae Spears' injury coming into play, the Titans don't have the numbers at running back to deal with a Mullings big-time knock you out for multiple months injury. So I'm actually happy to hear that it's an ankle injury for Kalel Mullings, and I think that he's going to be fine and good to go. He should be ready for the regular season, but I don't think that Tyjae Spears will be. I don't buy that. When Tyjae Spears first got hurt and they came out and said that it was a high ankle sprain, I said, hey, high ankle sprains, normally 6 to 8 weeks. That's normally what you're dealing with when you have a high ankle sprain. Now, people came out, oh, he could be ready for week 1, 3-week injury. I was like, 6 to 8 weeks makes the most sense for me, and I think we could still have that, and that would put him at 8 weeks or 3 weeks, and then Well, yeah, I think that would be 8 weeks from when he suffered the injury in the first preseason game. So IR does make sense for Tyjae Spears. The problem is you keep Mullings as your number 2, and I don't think Mullings is ready to be a pure number 2 to Tony Pollard. You got to keep Julius Chestnut at that point because you need somebody who knows the system, who can tote the rock. But the problem is Julius Chestnut is just not talented enough. Did you guys see Kalel Mullings out there running out? Chestnut hit the good 4th down run and did the hurdle, and everybody loves Julius Chestnut because he looks so good in the preseason. You're like, man, this guy's pretty good. But the reality is Julius Chestnut, in my opinion, is not an NFL caliber running back. So if Spears goes to IR, now you're keeping Mullings, now you're keeping Chestnut. Are you going to bring in Mims? Are you going to bring in Jefferson? You need 4 running backs, in my opinion, at that point. You need somebody who is a better runner than Julius Chestnut, who can actually be a number 2. So I'm going to put 4 running backs on the roster because I don't know exactly if Tyjae Spears is going to go on IR or not. Just trying to warn you guys for transactions that could happen. But I'm going to go with 4 running backs because of the uncertainty of Tyjae Spears' injury. Mullings being a little bit banged up right now. They're going to need somebody who they know they can hand the ball to, and that's Julius Chestnut for better or worse. Now, I have Chestnut designated as my guy that I think if the Titans do go get somebody on waivers, like if Tyjae Spears doesn't go to IR, then I think Julius Chestnut could be on the chopping block if the Titans get somebody off of waivers. And if Tyjae Spears does go to IR, I think the Titans will probably grab a running back off waivers just to add to the roster and have 4 running backs there. So I'm going to go with 4 running backs in this initial look, but I think running back is one of the positions out of all of these that we discuss that could be super, super different on Friday afternoon than it is on Tuesday after the cuts happen. And a lot of it depends on what happens with Spears. But I would look for running back to be a place the Titans look to add a waiver option. It's just about whether Spears is on the roster or on IR, and whether Chestnut is secure or whether Chestnut is the guy that's getting moved off the roster for the player that they picked up on waivers. But either way, that's what I see. If Chestnut is cut because the Titans bring somebody else, I could see them getting Julius Chestnut back on the practice squad. But if Chestnut makes the roster, I would look at a guy like Mims, like Jordan Mims, who I think had some explosive movement in the preseason. So that's 4. So 7 wide receivers, 4 running backs. We're up to 11 on the offensive side of the ball, and we move to the tight end room. And the tight end room was one of the most difficult ones for me to decide on. I don't think the Titans have more than 2 good tight ends. I don't think Josh Wiley. I don't think David Martin Robinson. I don't think that Thomas Odukoye. I don't think that any of them are good enough to make the Titans roster. And I think this is a absolute spot where the Titans are going to look for waivers. And if they can find a better tight end who could be tight end 3, I think they'll grab that player off waivers. They'll cut any of the other tight ends that aren't Gunnar Helm and Chigakonkwo, and they'll ride with 3 tight ends. I think they wanted to go with 3 tight ends all along. I think that's what the Titans want. And I think they can do that because they can have a 10th offensive lineman. But the problem is when you don't know how many wide receivers you're going to, or how many running backs you're going to be keeping, and you don't know who you're going to be able to pick up on waivers, there are guys who you might as well just keep them around on the active roster and knowing that they'll probably be players who will be cut. So at tight end, I went with 4 guys. I went with Gunnar Helm. I went with Chigakonkwo. I went with David Martin Robinson, who I think is actually the tight end 3 out of this group. And I did throw Josh Wiley on the roster at the end. And Wiley is a perfect example of what I just said. I think the Titans are going to just keep guys around to hold spots. They're literally just holding a roster spot rather than having open spots. And as soon as they get a guy on waivers who they can trust or that they like, they'll move on. And I think that's Josh Wiley. So I'm going to have Josh Wiley making the initial 53-man roster, but I do not think that Josh Wiley stays on the roster for more than a couple of days. And quite frankly, I think David Martin Robinson could be in that exact same boat. But I'm going to have David Martin Robinson as the tight end 3, who I think the Titans will keep. But I think David Martin Robinson and Josh Wiley are both on the chopping block. I have both of them marked as guys who could be cut after the initial 53 is set up and they make it. Now, that means Thomas Odukoye does not make the team. And I've said all along, Thomas Odukoye is not a good enough player to make the roster. He's not. He's not. And he's been around forever because he's an international pathway player. In my opinion, this sounds bad, But I think Thomas Odukoye is one of those guys who the Titans keep around because it looks good to have some international players in the NFL, you know? And that's why you get a roster exemption for it. So here's how it's worked with Thomas Odukoye for most of his career. Whether he's been on practice squad, whether he's been in the 90-man group during training camp, the Titans actually got 91 players in training camp this year. When the Titans have Thomas Odukoye on the practice squad, they actually get to have 17 players instead of 16 on the practice squad because Thomas Odukoye has typically gotten the Titans an international pathway player exemption. So literally, just because the NFL wants to promote international players and the NFL wants to turn football into an international game, they will allow teams in the NFL to apply for an exemption so they can literally have more players on their roster than is legally allowed if some of those players are international players. And Mike Vrabel used that for a while to get an extra player on the roster, and the Titans have continued to use Thomas Odukoye like that. So at the end of the day, it's not very fair to Odukoye, but I don't think he ever had a real chance to make this roster. I know because he's big and strong and more of a traditional blocker. Some would say his unique skill set gives him an opportunity, but I just think he's so bad in the other areas. He's never making the team, man. He's like that kid on your baseball team who's the worst player, and people say, good cut, Timmy, good cut, when he strikes out, and then the one time he does get a hit, it's like, oh, holy crap, Timmy got a hit, and everybody goes crazy. It's like, when the whole school votes the weird kid to be prom king as a joke or whatever, it's one of those situations for Thomas Odukoye, in my opinion. So I don't see him as a real option to make the roster. Now, because of the exemption, I think he gets on the Titans practice squad. They'll continue to have him if they need him, but I think ultimately the Titans carry 3 tight ends on the roster for most of the year, but I'll give them 4 in the initial cut with the idea that Wiley and DMR are likely just placeholders, with that being more true for Josh Wiley. So 7 wide receivers, 4 running backs, 4 tight ends right now. Quick math, carry the 2, that's 15. We have 2 positions left. The offensive line is a heavy one, folks. I you know me, I'm always committing to my offensive line. Today's episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner, and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, building their championship squads. If you haven't joined a league yet, now's the time, and it's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm going to be playing fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy. This is not the official announcement, but I'm going to start to lay clues. Locked On Titans Fantasy Football League on Yahoo. I think I'm going to be doing 2 Guillotine Leagues. I'm going to be announcing that later this week. And again, we're going to be playing on Yahoo Fantasy because it's loaded with fun ways to compete, and it has brand new features that make the game even better. With season kickoff on September 4th, now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football. They offer a ton of different ways to compete. They have Guillotine Leagues. They have Classics. They have head-to-head draft. They have a new draft with Friends mode. Super, super cool. Even if you don't have a big group to join a public league. It's the easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off again September 4th, so don't wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, doing my initial 53-man roster predictions. I keep saying initial because I'm used to that, but this is my final 53-man roster prediction. We're doing the offense today. I'll do the defense on tomorrow's show, and then on Tuesday night, I'll be dropping here on YouTube and the podcast to go over who actually did make the roster instead of just my predictions, and we'll see how things turned out. I told you why I think Xavier Restrepo is not going to make the team, and I'm going to be wrong, but I think that doesn't make the Titans right. Also, running back and tight end is tough. I don't have a lot of good options there for you. Let's see what the Titans do with waivers. But going to the offensive line, I do think the Titans have a lot of pretty good options on the offensive line. And that's why I went with 10 guys on the offensive line. Before I tell you who they are, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen. Now check out Locked On Fantasy Football as your second listen. Hosts Vinny Iyer, Michelle Majuk, the Data Queen. Get you ready for your fantasy draft so you can be the most informed manager. Take home your league's trophy. I did my first fantasy football draft this weekend. So much fun. Again, Locked On Titans Fantasy League coming your way soon. But you got to go to Yahoo Fantasy and you got to check out Locked On Fantasy Football to get ready for it. With that being said, offensive line, 10 positions. 10 guys. You have the starting 5 of Dan Moore, Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, who I think should be ready for week 1. It's good signs. Kevin Zeitler, the KG veteran, and then J.C. Latham. So you're going to have your starting 5 offensive linemen. Obviously, those are 5 spots. But after that, we have Corey Levin, who has been the backup center for Lloyd Cushenberry the entire offseason. If something were to happen to Cushenberry, if he were to have a setback, if he were to just not be ready for week 1, you need somebody who's been practicing in there the entire offseason. Corey Levin is absolutely making the roster. Now, I think Jackson Slater, the Titans' 6th-round rookie out of Sacramento State, I think he's absolutely going to make the roster. He's been pretty impressive in the preseason. I think Blake Hance, though. Blake Hance, 6'5", 300-some pounds, bigger-bodied guy. He could play 4 positions on the offensive line, both guard spots, both tackle spots. I think that versatility and the history that he has with Bill Callahan from their time together in the past, I think that makes Blake Hance a lock to make this team. Now, the 2 offensive tackles are not as much of a lock, but I do have 2 more offensive tackles. I have Ali Udoh and I have John Ojukwu. And Ali Udoh, in my opinion, is the number 1 swing tackle for the team. When Latham didn't play in the last game of preseason, it was Ali Udoh who started at right tackle. When the second team offensive line comes in, it's Ali Udoh who goes to left tackle. So I think being able to play left tackle, being able to play right tackle, being the number 1 offensive tackle off the bench for the Titans in multiple situations, I think that tells us all we need to know, that Ali Udoh is the backup swing tackle, or is the swing tackle, the number 1 backup offensive tackle for the Tennessee Titans right now. I'm going to also put John Ojukwu on the roster. Number 1, the Titans don't have a lot of good options at other places. Also, I think Ojukwu has great versatility as the 6th offensive lineman. Like, they like to bring John Ojukwu in as a big-bodied tight end. And considering that a lot of the tight ends I don't like, David Martin Robinson, Josh Wiley, Chigakonkwo, 3 of those tight ends can't even block. So John Ojukwu is a big tight end, and the Titans' heavy packages, I think that gets him on the initial roster. But I think part of doing that is, part of the reason that you put John Ojukwu on the roster is not just because of that versatility and that value that he brings. But I think the Titans, because he can do that and because he's so comfortable in that role, the Titans don't want to lose him. So if you cut John Ojukwu during normal cut downs, he could likely be picked up off waivers by someone else. But if you wait, if you keep John Ojukwu on the active roster at the beginning, he makes the initial 53, 4 p.m. Tuesday Eastern Time, John Ojukwu makes the roster. Well, other players get cut. And what happens is teams place waiver claims on all the players they're interested in after cuts. Well, if you pick up someone off waivers that day, and on Wednesday, you add an offensive tackle, or you add another tight end or running back or whatever you want to do off waivers, then you cut John Ojukwu. So instead of cutting him on Tuesday, you're releasing him on Wednesday. Now more teams out there have already picked up guys off waivers. They've already added players they like. They've already added the guys that they were interested in. So there's less opportunity for a guy like a John Ojukwu to get picked up by somebody else. And then you can slide him back to your practice squad, and you can elevate him on game days if you need to have a heavy package game plan. So it's the best of both worlds. So that's why I think John Ojukwu will stay on the roster, even if the Titans don't necessarily expect to have him on the active roster all year. You got to play the games here, and you got to play the dominoes and how things are going to fall out. But again, 10 offensive linemen for me. So if you're keeping score at home, that's 7 wide receivers, 4 running backs, 4 tight ends. That's 8 plus 10 offensive linemen. That's 25. And then the final group that we have to talk about is the quarterbacks. And I think the Titans keep 2 quarterbacks with Cam Ward and Brandon Allen. Let me just say also one last thing about the offensive line. I want to see Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon from the Florida Gators, undrafted free agent offensive tackle, and then Andrew Rupcich, who I thought had a really good start to the preseason as a backup guard. I think Rupcich and Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon, and then eventually John Ojukwu are the Titans practice squad offensive linemen. But quarterbacks, again, we're going to have two. Cam Ward, obviously, and then Brandon Allen. And it's the same thing that I've been telling you guys the entire offseason after Brandon Allen was signed. He's not any good. They know it. But he's a good mentor for Cam Ward. He can be a great liaison for the coaching staff in the quarterback room to teach Cam Ward. And not only that, but he sucks. So if Cam Ward doesn't play, the Titans will lose. And if they lose, they'll get a better draft pick, and then they'll have a better draft pick to rebuild the roster better with better players, and that's what the Titans want. Mike Borgonzi, Chad Brinker, they're never going to come out and say, yeah, if Cam Ward gets hurt, we don't want to win because we need to build this roster and we don't have any superstar talent to do it. They're never going to come out and say that publicly. But actions are louder than words. And I know a lot of you guys just refuse to believe that the Titans could be operating this way, but they have a backup quarterback who's 33 years old and has less career passing yards than Will Levis and a similar record. So, wake up, They're telling you how they feel about the backup situation. They don't want a great backup. They don't want an awesome backup. They don't want to win games if Cam Ward's not playing. They're telling you that, and nothing's going to change with that with these rosters. Now, I would say Trevor Siemian makes the practice squad, but the Titans could churn that third quarterback on practice squad all year, just depending on who becomes available. You know what I mean? It just depends. But they'll have a third quarterback on practice squad, and for right now, it'll be Trevor Siemian because he's just a professional who knows what the coaching staff is going to ask for. So that's 2 quarterbacks, 10 offensive linemen, that's 12, 4 tight ends, 4 running backs, that's 20, and 7 wide receivers. That's 27 spots on offense, and I got to tell you, it was even harder to find spots on the defensive side of the ball. But I'll be back with you guys tomorrow to give you my defensive roster predictions. Can't wait to dive into that. We might start getting some cuts on Monday, and if we do, I'll obviously sprinkle that into our conversations that we have about the defense on tomorrow's show. With that being said, though, that's going to do it for me today. Folks, as always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.